Would you pray with me, please? Oh God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be pleasing and acceptable to you this day, for you truly are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So who knew when we began this series of entering into the Passion of Jesus, looking at Holy Week over 6 weeks, that we would land on today, talking about putting on the armor of God and about Jesus in the garden with his words, "Take this cup from me, but God, your will, not mine." A time when the front lines of the people doing work on behalf of all of us literally need armor to be safe, and literally trying to negotiate a better way. All of the people with hand sanitizer and toilet paper, perhaps thinking that they can negotiate their way out, just as in Jesus' prayer, "Take this cup from me." But there is no way that we can negotiate our way out of this. There are so many crying, perhaps you as well as me, because the circumstances of our lives are filled with this extreme loss. We are heartbroken for the loss. Death seems to be everywhere. For some, the loss is economic, the loss of job, the loss of health insurance. For some, for children, the loss of normalcy, of going to school 5 days a week, not being able to be with their friends. For some, especially the aging in homes throughout our country, all of a sudden being extremely alone and families not being able to visit. The loss of companionship for all of us. The loss of safety for many, and the loss of life. So the preciousness of life is lifted before us. And we might be tempted to be like Jesus, to try and negotiate our way out. And I say flippantly, with the use of toilet paper and hand sanitizer. But I'm afraid there's no way to do that here in these days. It's happening everywhere and to everyone. And if we go to this gospel lesson and look at Jesus's words to his followers, he wanted them to go to the garden to pray, to stay awake with him. And they didn't, over and over again. So our message is in part for us to stay awake, to realize and recognize the reality of our life. We can't ignore it. We can't turn our head and pretend it's only happening in another part of the world, because it is happening right here to us, because it is happening to everyone in the world. And in staying awake, one of the things that happens is we're all of a sudden awakened to how crazy our brain gets, right? With all of the worry and all of the things that we should or shouldn't do. And sometimes we can stay stuck there on that treadmill, if you will, or hamster wheel. But I think it is important for us to pull down into the heart center and find what we are really feeling. And I think that's part of Jesus' invitation to his followers, to stay awake. Stay awake to what's going on in your heart, not just your head. How are you feeling about all of this? I did a devotion earlier this week talking about being scared, because I am. That's part of what I'm feeling. What are you feeling? What are you awakened to? Perhaps some things that you don't want to think about. But Jesus' invitation is there anyway. Be alert. Stay awake. Know what's going on, yes, with the outside world, but in particular with your inner world. You see, this pulls us in and invites us to truly live connected in another way. Remember, we've been talking about for weeks now, finding ourselves in the story of Jesus. How do we do that now? What does it mean to let go of negotiating whatever it is we want, and to allow, to surrender to God's love in the midst of this? We can't deny the feelings that we have, which is troubling, because the world that we knew, the world that we were accustomed to even 6 weeks ago, is gone. And it will never return in the same way. Whatever happens, we know that to be sure. You can't go back to a river and put your feet in a spot where you were many years ago expecting the same river to be there, because it's not. The same with this life. The world is forever changed because of this virus. We are more than hundreds of miles, perhaps thousands of miles away from what we knew as normal. And our temptation is to keep things as normal as we can. And so we kind of pull in and we're trying to fix things and we're trying to figure things out. And so we're spending our time. And although this is not bad, because I think decluttering is always a good thing, but perhaps we're excessively cleaning out closets and not allowing the heart space of the grief we feel about doing that very thing. Not allowing our hearts to catch up with the rest of us. Taking the risk of showing up to your feelings, staying awake and praying, setting aside all of those busy thoughts. And it's hard, I know. If you are unable to concentrate, that's normal in a time like this. If feeling abnormal seems unusual to you, know that that's normal. It's a part of the days that we are in. And it is especially important for us to be kind to others, certainly, when we do make that once-a-week trip to the grocery store. But also to be kind to ourselves and to allow what's happening in our heart to settle in so that we can look at it and pray about it and see how God might be leading us to be different, to live more awake to this world. We are truly in a time of collective grief, and that loss is huge. That corporate sense, and we know of that. When 9/11 happened, there was this corporate grief. When the mass shooting happened here in Las Vegas on that October 1st day, we had a sense of knowing collective grief. And here it is again. We have lost what is normal. And that's okay, because God is still here with us. But for us in particular, as a worship community, as a community of faith, one of the things we've lost and grieve, particularly right now on Palm Sunday as we head into Holy Week and then Easter, we can't go to our space and worship together. That doesn't mean that we don't love God and that we're following Jesus. But we have a sense of loss. Perhaps some of you have never missed an Easter Sunday, and our hearts are heavy because of that. But this is what we must do for the sake of others. Just as Jesus said to God, "Your will be done." One of the things we have to realize in this corporate grief, as we see on the television so many things happening, so many people's experiences, and we might find our mind moving to places of judgment about what a kindergartner is upset about because they can't have their graduation with the cap and gown and the fun little songs that they've learned during the year. For the sense of that 5-year-old, this grief is huge. And we recognize that in the high school or college graduate as well. That everything they have worked for, what was meant to be celebrated in a huge event with family and friends and pomp and circumstances, is now seemingly gone. And yet we have to understand, not with judgment, but with love, that for anybody in this time, that their grief, their individual sense of loss, because it's theirs, is the greatest they have ever experienced. For that 5-year-old, they don't know anything else. So of course it's huge, and of course they don't understand. And the same for the college graduate. The same for any of us. It is our sense of loss and being able to understand that each one, in their own unique way, has suffering. And that that's okay, that it's theirs, and that we certainly cannot judge, even though to us at this moment that doesn't seem important. So being able to honor everyone, to respect everyone, to be kind to everyone is so important. The temptation might be to run and hide. It is my hope that you won't. It was part of what the experience of the disciples from this night on. We see running and hiding all over, all the way even until Easter Sunday. Hiding away, afraid. But we know what's being asked. Jesus saying, stay awake and pray. We know that is something that we can do from here, wherever here is for us, to pray for those that are who are on the front lines, pray for those who are sacrificing so much so that we have life, not unlike Jesus' sacrifice for us. We are all facing difficult circumstances, just like Jesus did that night in the garden. God, take this cup from me. And oh, if we could do that. But that is not the case right now. So as the world is seemingly falling apart around us, one of the questions that I have for you and for myself is, what's at the center? What's at the core of your heart? What's at the center of your life? And how is that center connected to Jesus' call to stay awake, to stay alert, and to pray? We've been asked all this time to enter the story, to put our lives in the frame of Jesus' life and death, and the rest of the story that we know is coming in the midst of all of the pain and suffering that is real right now. Resurrection comes. Amen.